Appalachian time slips. When the mountains steal time in Appalachia's remote hollows, people vanish for hours or days, returning with no memory of where they've been or how they got there. Long before modern researchers documented missing time experiences in connection with unidentified aerial phenomena, the people of Appalachia knew the mountains could steal hours from a person's life. They knew that a walk into the woods might cost you a day you could never account for. They knew that time itself, in certain remote hollows and ridges, did not always move the way it should. The phenomenon appears in documented accounts spanning more than a century, collected by folklorists, oral historians, and regional researchers who operated independently across the Appalachian mountain chain. The reports share a disturbing consistency. A person enters the wilderness on familiar business, hunting, gathering herbs, tending livestock on mountain pastures. Hours later, or sometimes days later, they emerge confused and disoriented. The time they experienced does not match the time that passed in the world they left behind. Vance Randolph, the folklorist who spent decades documenting Ozark tradition in the early 20th century, recorded multiple accounts from informants who described these experiences not as folklore, but as events that happened to them personally. His subjects spoke with the careful precision of people trying to explain something that defied explanation. They went into the mountains at dawn. They remember walking, perhaps sitting to rest. Then they find themselves somewhere else entirely, with the sun in the wrong position in the sky or darkness falling when it should still be afternoon. The accounts come from Kentucky coal country, from Virginia's Blue Ridge, from the Tennessee highlands, from the Ozark plateaus. The researchers who documented them worked in different decades, followed different methodologies, served different academic institutions. They were not comparing notes. They were not looking for patterns across regional boundaries. Yet the patterns emerge regardless. A man sets out to check his trapline on a cold November morning. His route is familiar. He has walked it hundreds of times. He remembers reaching the first trap, found empty. He remembers moving toward the second location. His next clear memory is standing in a creek bed he does not recognize, with the sun setting behind ridges he cannot identify. When he finally finds his way home, using the stars to navigate, his wife tells him he has been gone for 2 days. He has no memory of those 48 hours. His body shows no signs of exposure, no injuries, no indication of what occurred during the missing time. A woman gathering ginseng in a familiar watershed loses the trail. This in itself is not unusual. The forest canopy can disorient even experienced woodspeople. But when she finds a logging road and follows it out of the mountains, she emerges 15 miles from where she entered the woods. She has walked, by her own estimation of time and fatigue, perhaps 2 hours. The sun's position suggests she has been gone since morning. Her family, when she reaches them, tells her she disappeared 3 days prior. Search parties went looking for her. She remembers nothing but the 2-hour walk through unremarkable forest. The structural features repeat across the documented cases. The witness enters a familiar landscape on routine business. A discontinuity occurs, not always remembered as a specific moment, sometimes experienced as a gap, a jump, a missing piece in the continuous flow of consciousness. The witness finds themselves in an unfamiliar location or returns to find that more time has passed than they can account for. The experience is involuntary. It is not sought. It cannot be predicted or controlled. Some accounts include additional elements. Witnesses describe conversations with strangers encountered in the woods, people whose clothing seems subtly wrong, whose speech patterns sound archaic, who vanish when the witness turns away. Others report finding themselves in communities they do not recognize, staying briefly in homes that later cannot be located, speaking with families who offered hospitality and then disappeared from the landscape entirely when the witness tried to retrace their steps. These elaborated accounts share features with Celtic fairy tradition, where time moves differently in the fairy realm than in the human world. A night spent dancing with the fair folk might consume years in the mortal world. The structural similarity is not coincidental. Many Appalachian families carried Scottish and Irish ancestry, brought Celtic folklore with them across the Atlantic, preserved it in isolated mountain communities where old ways persisted longer than in more connected regions. But the time slip phenomenon also appears in indigenous tradition from the same geographic region. Stories of the little people, the Nanehi, the spirit beings who inhabit remote places in Cherokee and other southeastern tribal accounts, include warnings about time distortion. A person who encounters these entities might find themselves lost in time as well as space. The convergence of independent cultural traditions, Celtic, indigenous, and Anglo-American mountain folk experience, describing the same core phenomenon in the same geographic region, presents a pattern that resists simple explanation. Randolph documented his Ozark accounts in the 1920s and 1930s. His informants were describing events from their own lives, events that occurred in living memory. They spoke with embarrassment sometimes, aware that their experiences sounded impossible. They offered details that suggested they had spent years trying to make sense of what happened to them. The frustration in their accounts is palpable, the inability to explain, to themselves or others, where the time went. Regional newspapers from the 19th and early 20th centuries occasionally report similar incidents, usually framed as mysterious disappearances, followed by equally mysterious reappearances. A hunter vanishes in familiar territory. Days later, he walks out of the woods miles from where he entered, with no memory of the intervening period. The newspaper reports treat these as curiosities, human interest stories, unexplained local mysteries. They do not attempt systematic analysis. They do not connect disparate incidents into a pattern. The systematic investigation that other paranormal phenomena attract has largely bypassed Appalachian time slips. The accounts exist as isolated reports in folklore collections, as scattered newspaper items, as oral tradition preserved by families who experienced them. No research team has attempted to catalog and analyze them comprehensively. No investigative organization has focused resources on understanding the phenomenon. The documentation exists, spread across archives and academic collections, but the synthesis remains incomplete. The consequences of extended time slip experiences appear in the documented accounts. Families search desperately for missing members. Livestock go untended, suffering from the absence of their caretaker. Obligations go unmet. The social and economic impact of losing days without warning or explanation creates genuine hardship in communities where survival depends on reliable labor and predictable schedules. The psychological impact persists longer. Witnesses describe profound disorientation, a fundamental violation of their understanding of how reality functions. Memory is continuous. Time moves forward in a predictable flow. These basic assumptions about existence fail during a time slip experience, and the failure leaves lasting uncertainty. If time can jump forward without warning once, what prevents it from happening again? The loss of confidence in basic perceptual reliability haunts witnesses long after the physical experience ends. The transition out of anomalous time appears as involuntary as the transition into it. No documented account describes a witness deliberately choosing to return to normal temporal flow. The experience simply ends. Consciousness returns. The witness finds themselves somewhere, sometimes their original location, sometimes somewhere entirely different, with time having moved forward in the external world while remaining compressed or absent in their subjective experience. No witness reports successfully recreating the experience. The time slips are not controllable. They cannot be induced or predicted. They happen to people going about ordinary business in familiar territory, and they end without explanation, leaving witnesses with gaps in their continuous life narrative that can never be filled. Modern researchers examining these accounts note parallels with missing time experiences reported in contemporary unidentified aerial phenomena cases, with temporal distortion documented near certain geological formations with unusual electromagnetic properties, with the altered time perception reported in extreme psychological states. The Appalachian tradition predates modern investigation by generations, preserved in communities with little connection to academic anomaly research or ufology. The independent emergence of similar accounts suggests either a genuine phenomenon or a deeply rooted cognitive pattern that produces consistent false experiences across cultures and centuries. The Appalachian Mountains themselves may play a role. The region's complex geology, its deep hollows and isolated ridges, its areas where magnetic anomalies cluster, its long history of human occupation layered across indigenous presence. These factors create conditions found in few other North American locations. Whether those conditions contribute to genuine temporal distortion, to psychological states that produce time-slip experiences, or to the preservation of cultural narratives that shape how people interpret disorienting wilderness encounters, remains an open question. What remains documented, preserved in archives and oral tradition across the mountain chain, is the consistent pattern of experience. People enter the woods, time breaks. They return changed, carrying gaps in their continuous existence that no explanation can fill. If you found this case compelling, subscribe to Vanishing Roads for more documented paranormal investigations from around the world. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented case files. All events reference real investigations and reported incidents.